Hello, hello, and welcome to the Weeder Life podcast. I'm your host, Erica Weederlight, and I am the CEO and founder of Weederlight. I help humans who feel inadequate, broken, self-conscious, and shamed around their sexuality to reclaim their aliveness, their power, and to have a renewed relationship to pleasure while preparing themselves to feel hella confident to date others and themselves. AKA, I'm guiding people to live their #best lives. I have to give you a fair warning. I do unfortunately swear like a drunken sailor, so if you do have little ones by you, just be sure to pop in some earbuds. All right, friends, let's buckle up and let's rock it to this week's episode. Hello, and welcome back. I am so excited for this episode today. We have an amazing, profound human on the pod today, and I am just so excited to get into the meat, get into talking, do the jams. So without further ado, our next fabulous guest, Matthew Brownstein. And Matthew, oh my gosh, I cannot wait to tell you a little bit about Matthew. So it began with his journey into spirituality, health, and healing in 1992, and he had a profound spiritual awakening, and we're going to talk about this in the pod. But him having this experience really began with seeking the truths of all the world's great wisdom traditions, and he actually ended up changing his major to religion. And he soon discovered a relationship to mysticism and all of the more esoteric branches, which led him to this increased spiritual experience and spiritual experiences. And not knowing what to do with this knowledge, he then went to his first acupuncture college to learn more about how energy blockages keep us from health, wholeness, and spiritual realization. Matthew also just such a rich education and living in these practices. And some things he has done and did was he studied, like we said, traditional Chinese medicine at the Southwest College of Acupuncture. Yet he soon then found the hypnotherapy and NLP, his programs around that. And he became fascinated with the mind's ability to heal the body, clear emotional blocks, and restore oneself to this true spirit, to this true higher self. And again, the training goes on and on. I could be here, but I want to get into the pod. But his trainings are just so vast, including Chinese medicine, acupuncture, massage, nutrition, Reiki, herbology, hypnotherapy, breathwork, NLP, yoga, Tai Chi, meditation, past life regression, and like I said, the list goes on and on. And with all of these trainings and certificates and life studies, Matthew is now a CEO of this education group and an executive director of the Institute of Interpersonal Hypnotherapy and the president at the International Association of Interpersonal Hypnotherapists. So much to discuss. What an amazing human being. Without further ado, here's Matthew. Oh my gosh. Hello. I am so happy to have you. Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here with you.
You are just an amazing, incredible human being with so much life experience, so much to offer. Can you talk to us a little bit? And I'm sure this is going to be like a bulk of the episode, but can you go in and talk about like how you got here? I know you've had a really profound, and I'm sure there's been micro moments and you know, this whole long journey, but can you talk about that like boom, big stereotypical, you know, not stereotypical, but that boom, big spiritual experience? I think I read it was like in 1992 or something where you're like, whoa, I'm making this big life change.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the compliment. Yeah, it's nothing personal about me. I felt like I was nothing special. I still feel that way when people are like, wow, you've done so much. I'm like, only because of what happened on January 13th, 1992. If not, there's nothing really motivating me to do any of my life's work, except when that experience happened, it did change me forever. It went from normal, whatever that is, but normal to me was feeling separate, feeling like an individual human being where things are big and small and up and down and left and right, a world of duality, essentially. And when the spiritual awakening happened, everything became one. It wasn't like up or down. There was just light was everywhere. There was bliss, there was peace, there was joy. When people haven't had this experience, like the first spiritual awakening, they might just think, oh, this is just, one brief, you categorize like any other experience, right? But when somebody really has a profound spiritual awakening, they're changed forever. So I've met a lot of people who have had out-of-body experiences, and when they come back, they're not the same, right? Because oh my God, I'm a spiritual being. Nobody can convince me that I'm a body anymore. So this was the first of many experiences. And eventually, it's not really an experience, it's just reality. So that's what happened. Reality was just there in my face, not just in my face, I mean, like literally everywhere and everything as me, as all it is. But then that experience, if you want to call it that, went away the next morning. And that's what started an intense life path searching to find ways to find that again. So I found meditation, yoga, Tai Chi, all the energetic medical studies I went through, Chinese medicine, of course, things like Reiki. But that really led to hypnotherapy because I wanted to know, how do we get people into this state? This would be the solution, right? If everybody was at peace, if everybody was happy, my God, the world would be a better place. So what's keeping us from that? It's not the world itself. It's not spirit itself. It's not our bodies. It's our mind. And once I realized, oh, there are blockages in the mind, ways of thinking, suppressed emotions, an internal state of being that keeps us from this experience, then my life's work just became, let's find a way to clear these blocks. And the most effective way that I found to do it is hypnotherapy. And then I've spent now 25 years refining the methods that I teach at our institute so that anybody basically can duplicate what I do in the realms of healing and enlightenment. And for them and for others to tap into it as well.
Oh, it's amazing. There's so much I want to unpack here. Definitely the hypnotherapy thing, because for me, that was hypnotherapy. That was, for me, and I'll talk about that in a second, a very transformational tool that I was like, oh, I'll try this. And I was like, oh, like I did not expect what I got from that. Like I was like, oh, this will be helpful. And actually, we'll go right into it now, and then we'll backtrack a little bit. Like, again, I'll talk about my personal experience. I was like, oh, this will help for this, maybe for this little thing. And it pulled out things I never was conscious of. I was like, oh my God. And it was an extremely healing modality for me. It really changed so much for me. And I saw my hypnotherapist recently, and I was like, Carla, I don't think you understand. I listen to your, your meditations and your tapes all the time. And it's just such a soothing, healing modality for me. So can you talk about, for you, like you said, it was such a game changer because of the blockages and all that. Like, can you give us a little bit of like a tasting of what it means to you, why you think it's powerful? And this is a mask going into it, like your big differences between that and NLP.
Okay, sure. Yeah, get me back to the NLP theme if I forget to go there. But the main theme that I found in hypnotherapy was like when you talked about, sure, you can go into hypnosis. Well, that feels good, just relaxation alone, but that's not profound spiritual awakening, or even just like guided imagery or being reprogrammed. Great stuff, but again, not necessarily the path to liberation or enlightenment, because essentially in an NLP model, we have perceptions. You have negative perceptions, you have positive perceptions. People feel, well, if I shift from negative to positive, that's the path, that's the way to go, right? If I can just use hypnosis to program it all positive. But essentially, all you're doing there is taking your dark glasses and putting on rose-colored ones. The idea, though, is you still have filters. So in NLP, we have your neuro-linguistic filters. The neuro filters are just the information that comes in through the five senses, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? That's just how we're wired. But the linguistic filters are what we're doing in our mind that create a feeling of separation between us and the outside world, where I say, here is me, and here is the world. This is a computer and this is a person. I'm the person, I'm not the computer. That feeling of separation is self-induced, and you can't really hypnotically program it away, but you can definitely use hypnosis to move in the right direction. What I found in my early years of study about why are we not all immersed in divine light and love? I mean, if that's the fabric of the universe, if 95% of the population believes in God, why are we not experiencing it? Why are we not rolling in the floor in ecstasy if there's bliss that permeates the universe? So hypnotic programming can't quite get you there. What I learned but hypnosis can get you there. You just have to understand how to use it in the really deep ways. In my early days of studies, I learned about a yogic term called sanskar, or pronounced in the West often samskara. These essentially are blockages, like in A Course in Miracles, they're the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. A sanskar is essentially, for a human being, a memory or set of memories, negative beliefs we hold about ourselves, usually the negative ones we focus on, but like I said, any beliefs, and all those negative emotions we hold on to. So your sanskars are like your buttons, like, oh, he can really push my buttons. All right. So those are the blocks. And when I was in Chinese medical school and going through, 2 different Chinese medical colleges, really determined that I'm going to remove all of humanity's blockages. I just didn't feel like I could do it with needles. But when I started getting into the mental level of things and seeing, oh, wow, you can unravel sanskars, you can clear blocks by mental shifts that are rooted essentially in forgiveness. So the real work, and I teach NLP, but I teach what I call interpersonal NLP based on our hypnotherapy model, which is interpersonal hypnotherapy. That's very hard to explain, in less than a minute now. But I can say that the root of that work is personal. It's interpersonal. So let's say, for instance, I'm upset with you. You and I are one, right? We're part of the same body. We're part of the same earth. Bigger than that, we're part of the same consciousness or the same spirit. And if I feel separate from you because I'm angry, I feel separate from the whole. So the path, especially in A Course in Miracles, is through forgiveness. I let go of my false perceptions, the filters that I project onto you through forgiveness, which is mental. I can let go of the structure or the sanskaric patterns I hold in my mind. It's essentially taking off the dark glasses. You don't need to put on rose-colored glasses. Just get rid of the filters. Hypnotherapy can absolutely get rid of the filters when it's done at a very high level. So again, beyond just hypnotic programming, like NLP, you've got this idea of neurolinguistic programming, because we're all essentially programmed. So people say, oh, you're going to put me into sleep in hypnosis. And we like to say in the field, no, it's not my job to put you to sleep. It's my job to wake you up. And once I heard those type of things about hypnotherapy, it's like, wow, it's a profession. I can do this and make a living waking people up. I remember one of my clients, she said, can we just go out and we'll just sit at the top of this mountain overlook? I'm like, yeah, why not? I could be out of the box. And I sat up there reading Rumi, poems to this woman on the top of the mountain. I'm like, I can't believe I get paid for this, to be a spiritual guide who can clear people's blockages. So yeah, when it's done with that understanding, it can literally liberate people from suffering. And that's significant.
Apps so significant. It's such and again, I think there's a misconception around it. I remember I was like, do I even need this? You know what I mean? And then I was like, oh my gosh, I did not expect what I got from it. It was such a transformative tool. And I want to go back to you talking about your story and how you got here. And what I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, is for you, the experience, quote unquote experience, the shift, the awakening was what you experienced, oh my gosh, bliss, ecstasy, love. Was that your experience that you were like, I need to keep finding that?
It was that, yet it was more than even just that, because good feelings come and go.
Right.
But this was like jumping into an ocean and realizing, oh, this doesn't come and go. This is what is. This is everywhere. The poet Kabir, he said, I laugh when I hear that the fish in the ocean is thirsty. And that's what humanity is. We're just starved for something and we're looking in all the wrong places, right? Just trying to find love outside of yourself, thinking about you just get the new home, the new car, more money. When do we just stop and say, what do I really want? What is my highest intention? And if you keep asking anybody that, why do you do this? Why do you do this? Well, why are you doing that? So why do you need the new car? Well, it'll make me, and just so, why do you want that? Why do you want that? Eventually they're going to say, I just want peace. I just want love. If you haven't done that, just trust me. If your listeners are like, is that true? Just do it with anything that you're motivated to do, which is usually an action outside of yourself. Why are you doing it? Because you're looking for an inner feeling. But feelings like happy or just a brief elation, that's going to come at euphoria. That's going to come and go. But what the great masters, the saints and sages, all consistently say, all around the world, it's not even debatable if anybody does the research, they have found essentially what we call God. And we don't have to call it God. Buddha called it Buddha nature, but it's the same reality. That reality is not just everything we want to feel. It's the Tao. It's the force that's guiding the whole universe in harmony. And so, theistically speaking, it's divine guidance. It's a voice far wiser, infinitely wiser. You can't even compare to your conscious or subconscious mind. So most people will turn to their conscious mind, your head. Well, what do I do? Why are you turning to that thing? It's wrong constantly. It has such limited data. And then we say, all right, well, I'm going to follow my heart. Your heart is a neurotic mess for most people, right? You've got this inner child in there who's not happy, not fulfilled, feels hurt and sad and scared and angry and guilty and shameful. And then you're turning to that part saying, well, what do you need to feel better? Ice cream, that'll make me feel better. If we listen to our subconscious mind, your heart of hearts is spirit, follow that. But the neurotic inner child and the neurotic conscious mind is not the source of divine guidance. So I found in that first awakening a presence that most people who tap into it, a lot of religious people just call it God. I know not everybody uses that word, and that word has negative connotations now, but the word exists because there is something beyond what our physical eyes see. Right. And science can only tap into that through experiment, right? Oh, there's 95% something or more, something else besides matter. Right? We got this dark matter, dark energy, but we don't know what it is. I'm not saying that is a God. I'm just saying everybody knows there's more. But the mystics, the great saints and sages, they've tapped into it, and it's a source of inspiration. So when you look like all my credentials and whatnot, it wasn't self-motivated. It was surrendering to that energy and saying, essentially, the deepest prayer I found, if you want to call it a prayer, the deepest intention is, I only want that reality. I'll let that reality govern my life. I'm not going to think I know where my life should go, where the future should go. So it's more than just an experience of bliss and love and peace and joy and oneness. It was, oh my God, it's not a meaningless universe. It's not just a bunch of random matter flying through space, evolving, hoping to survive. It's more than that. We all know that. There's got to be some more meaning, some more purpose. And that, to me, is probably the most powerful thing I realized, at least relevant to this conversation. It's more than just bliss. It's guidance about how to live your life in a way that leads to success and harmony relatively effortlessly. My life is beautiful beyond what I could imagine. And honestly, I've been semi-retired since I was 42 years old. I probably work 10 hours a week or something now, and that's just to keep the momentum going. So yeah, when you give your life to that reality, everything gets better. And that's such a beautiful teaching as well, beyond just waking up to bliss.
I love that. And there's so much I want to unpack from that, but what I really want to extract, especially since the work that I do is, I think so often, like you said, like we chase like the happiness, the this, and it's fleeting, like it's great. We love those little pockets of experience, but I love what you're talking about, this like deeper, fulfilling, mission, if you will. And it just, I don't know, it just feels really empowering. And I try to live like this too. Again, sometimes, my ego gets the best of me. And I dip out. But what a beautiful way to live and I think this is, I'm going to butcher this. I think this is a Course in Miracles. Go with me on this. You would know better. What is the quote? It's like, use me. Where would you have me go? What would you have me say? And to whom? That sounds familiar, right? Yeah, I'm butchering it a little bit.
Generally, the idea is, ask and receive.
Yes.
Turn to God. Just call it whatever you want, but turn to God and say, well, what do I do? Where do I go? More importantly than just asking is the being quiet to receive. We're all so good at talking, and we say, oh, no, I'm a good listener. But when you're not talking, you're talking to yourself, right? There's this constant inner dialogue, but there's a mechanism of listening. Right. And if we just, like right now, when you're listening to me, you don't have to think. You can just really listen. In meditation, we can apply that same way of being to our higher mind, right? And just say, okay, where do I go? Who do I speak to? Like my whole life path, I was 24 years old, almost 25. I just finished my graduate and postgraduate studies, and I realized, oh, it's time to do my career. So I went into the woods in the mountains of Colorado and meditated and fasted and prayed. And I said, all right, God, this is it. You've given me all this knowledge and wisdom, all these skills and techniques. Now, what do I do? Where do I go? How do I do it? I got all those downloads. I wrote it down. And essentially, I just followed only that. So yeah, we can ask, but we need to remember to receive. So what happens, you mentioned the ego and Course in Miracles. The Course teaches when you ask that question, the ego always answers first. It's remarkably arrogant. Right? It wants to have all the answers, but really has no answers. So we need to learn to discern spirit from ego. And once we know, okay, that's the voice for spirit, learn to trust that because it's infinitely wiser. And again, not even comparable to the insanity of the ego.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. That's exactly right. And I think that's such a powerful thing for us to remember of what would it be like if I lived from spirit, from my higher self, from that voice. And it's such a good point that we actually have to listen because I think we talk a lot in this community, like asking, talk, like problems, all these solutions. And it's like, what would it be like just to listen? So I need to take a little bit of that medicine too, a little bit more. So that's a really powerful point that you highlighted. And again, like living from higher self, from spirit, like that is such, I'll say this briefly. I think for me and for others, I know that's helped tremendously with anxiety, because our anxiety is can be such a voice from our ego. And so that for me has been a deal, I'll say deal breaker, a game changer where I'm like so in my own stuff, so in my own lane. And when I'm like, okay, let me breathe, let me self-soothe, let me ask and listen, that has been, so I just want to highlight that for any listeners with anxiety. Actually, let me ask, I'm going to throw that to you. Like what, have you seen that like positive benefits of this work with anxiety, with things of that sort?
Really with all pain and suffering, but
Yeah.
specifically, yes, anxiety for sure, but depression. Anxiety and depression to me are very similar in the sense that we all got really good as children, most of us, of suppressing our emotions, right? So every human being has hurt, sadness, fear, anger, guilt, shame. It just happens as we're growing up, like the development of our ego and the inner child ego state. But we tend to find that's not acceptable. We don't want to feel that. Nobody else wants to hear it. So we push it away. The anxiety tends to be the feeling of, oh God, I don't want to feel that. You're really just afraid of yourself. And depression is because you blocked all that stuff in there. And you've got all this, like, what's underneath all the depression? Usually a lot of anger and guilt. What's underneath the anxiety? Well, same thing, anger, guilt, fear, hurt. My experience of growing spiritually is I lived at a Zen monastery, and I remember the abbot once saying, if you want to know what real spirituality is, real Zen, he said, it's like the Coca-Cola commercial at the time. They were saying like nothing like the real thing. He said, just get real. I remember the first day I sat in front of this master. I was 23 years old, and you have to do the certain bow, and I screwed that up, and I'm sitting before him, and I'm nervous, I'm shaking, and he said, "You don't have to be nervous." I'm like, yeah, I do. And he goes, "Well, then it's okay to be nervous." And I swear to you, 50% of lifetime anxiety just stopped in that moment when I stopped resisting that feeling. When I just said, oh, I can't escape this person. I'm sitting in one small room with a master who sees right through me. He knows I'm scared. And then I just started admitting, oh, okay, I'm scared, but I didn't have to be anxious, meaning afraid of my own feelings, because it was okay to be afraid. It was okay to be vulnerable. It was okay to be real. And as a guy, we're not supposed to be wired that way, to be emotional and sensitive and intuitive. But I am. And, a lot of people, I'm sure like your audience, we're introverts, we're, like in the Myers-Briggs, where people turn within and we're feelers and we're sensitive. To not embrace that part of us can make us very anxious. But when we learn, I'm perfectly fine just as I am. It's okay to be a human being. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to be nervous. So much pressure is let off, but just letting life be life. Like the human body has a nervous system. It's going to go into sympathetic nervous system functioning, meaning fight or flight. It's going to do that. A Course in Miracles says nobody on this earth escapes fear and doubt, but we can question the reason, like why are we getting afraid? And that always comes back to the ego. It always comes back to the false self. But it's not to say we shouldn't have a false self. If you're dealing with a false self, you have a false self, but it is false, meaning it can be transformed. But that's a process. Like when you look at the path of enlightenment in most traditions, if you really study, okay, when somebody wakes up spiritually, how long to complete enlightenment? Because the first awakening is not the complete unfolding. It's usually a good 10 years of intense spiritual practice. So I have a person who just emailed me and said, I see you're into out-of-body travel. I want to have an out-of-body experience. I just started your system on that. I've been doing it for 20 minutes now. When am I going to get out of my body? I'm like, well, give it 20 years. And the Zen masters say, when you say, well, how long will it take to be enlightened? They go, oh, 10 years. 10 years? I don't have 10 years as a student. Well, it'll take you 20 years. 20 years? I don't have 20 years as a student. And the master says, it'll take you 30 years. So when we resist that, we've got issues. What we resist persists. So it's just surrendering to what is, which includes the neurotic self. But to give that to spirit as well, because we really don't know how to heal that. We're not the healer. The healing force is that infinite love. So it just as that force will heal your body when you break a wrist or something, that force will heal your heart if you can give that part of yourself to that being as well. And it's not even if, because eventually you have to, right? Eventually you suffer enough and you give up and you just say, all right, I even surrender my emotions to spirit. That's when you really start growing. Because you're not controlling your inner reality anymore. You're letting the divine in, and that light is what purifies the blockages. It's not really us as therapists or whatever that heal the heart, just like our doctors diagnose, God heals. The same is true of the heart. So yeah, anxiety, there's always going to be some level of that, especially for us, sensitive spiritual types, but allow it to be there. If we don't resist it, life is so much better.
That's a really beautiful perspective around anxiety because, I've been in this land for a while, and so often the narrative is, avoiding it actually. You know what I mean? Like I said, I'm like, oh my gosh, that like actually perpetuates the problem and resists the problem even more. So I just think that's a beautiful perspective on holding it versus shooing it away, get rid of it. It's I'm like, ooh, that just feels so much more softer, approachable, compassionate. I'm obsessed. Like, thank you. I'm really glad you spoke of that. And I want to talk about your online monastery because I was like, oh my gosh, like that is so cool. And I read up a little bit about, you do so many amazing things. It's incredible. And how cool. I just want to highlight this too. Like, you're doing it from a place where you feel genuinely moved. And I'm sure, like, actually, let me just ask you this. Like, does that feel different? Like how you would work? Like, let's just talk about like work and living. Like, does it feel different how you used to approach work before, where it's like, I have to do this, this, and this. And now it almost feels like, okay, I'm guided to this. Like, what's the difference in how you're living?
Well, honestly, there isn't a big difference because I woke up so young.
Yeah.
Most people, they get into this because they've suffered enough in their 40s or 50s. Like, oh my God, I'm just miserable. Let me try to meditate or try yoga. For whatever reason, I got slammed with divine light and love as an invasion when I was 19. Before that, I don't know, I was working at a bike shop. I was into cycling, which was great, fine, no judgment. But I was just doing it because, you're into cycling, you have a job. But I was in college, so it really didn't ever really truly work. I didn't have a career. So my career became healing and enlightenment. And then I just kept saying, all right, like, let me just follow my bliss. Let me just trust my joy. One of my teachers in the early days, he quoted Christ, who said, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven and all its righteousness, and all things will be added on to you. And this person ended up running $1 billion company by doing that. So I'm like, he became a multimillionaire of his own personal net worth, with a $1 billion company by just giving his life to God. Maybe I should try that too. So I never had a traditional work model. I've always been an entrepreneur. I've always seen private clients, opened my own school for hypnotherapy. And then, as you mentioned, all these other branches that have unfolded, onlinemonastery.com being one of those. So when I was the first awakening was in 92. I started then tapping into it again about a year later. And then it was just like more bliss, more light, more love, more of that wisdom, more of that joy. I can't even drive like my car at times because my eyes are rolling up in my head in ecstasy. It's like I was really tapping in, and it's glorious. But at one point I realized I'm totally ungrounded. I can't function in this world like this. You hear about these saints who are like their disciples will feed them because they literally don't care about their bodies anymore. They're so drunk on God. And I was really getting kind of dysfunctional in that way. And I was better off in a monastery. So I was living at Kripalu Yoga Ashram in 1996, and I couldn't live in the building. I was too sensitive. It's a big building, a lot of electrical energy, a lot of mental, psychic energy, people processing their stuff. So I was just living in the woods, in my tent, like 23 or so years old. And I'm saying, God, like I can't function in this world. What is the solution? How do I have like I'm not closing down my spirituality. That would be insane. But really, this is like just too intense. And that's when the Anahat meditation system that I teach at onlinemonastery.com came to me. It's based in sacred geometry way before anybody was talking about it. Before, we didn't have the internet. This was 1996. So, I didn't have a computer then. There wasn't the internet the way it is now. You couldn't go to YouTube and put a video about sacred geometry, but I had all of these profound energy movements moving through my body in the pattern of the six-pointed star. And I'm like, what is this, a Jewish symbol? Like, what is the Star of David stuff? Like, what is this? I didn't know about the Merkaba field and all this stuff a lot of spiritual people know about now. So yeah, long story short, this meditation system that really was awe-inspiring to me and offered the balance to be able to be fully grounded, fully functional in this world, like pay your taxes, make good money, have relationships, be a normal human being, but a really good one, being of service to others, but also having your heart fully open and being fully open to spirit. So the essence of the system is fully grounded, fully connect to spirit with a fully open heart. And I never found a system that could do that. It was either Zen practice, which had me very grounded, or yogic practice, which had me really blissing out. But I didn't find a balance, and nobody could really give me that answer. So in my own meditations, that's when that system came to me. And yeah, even though I don't make any money off of it, I give it away for free. It's 100 hours of free meditation training at onlinemonastery.com. And it was a blessing to me. So I just give it away. And yeah, we haven't monetized it in, 20 however plus years of running it now.
Wow, what a great tool. And I think that's actually super empowering. I keep saying that, but I think it's super empowering. I was talking with a friend the other day of like, it can be so exciting. Again, I'm going to say experience in quotes, but like a spiritual awakening experience. It's like, oh, I'm so excited. And then so often we get freaked out. We get fearful. We get into our heads of, oh my gosh, how will I continue this? How will there be longevity? And so often people have the fear of, oh, I'm scared. I feel a little bit too powerful. This is scary. And so I'm so grateful that you are providing a tool that can, like you said, we could be here, be present, be a human that pays taxes, that does the things, but also our foundation, our primary belief system, operating system is within that like spiritual realm.
Yeah, its fear is understandable. Like, again, I mentioned out of body experiences. When you start tapping into something beyond your ego, it can be scary. Anything, even just talking about, I remember in the early days talking to my family about reincarnation, and my grandparents later, they were like, we just want, again, I was in college, I was young, and they were just like, well, he just wanted you to shut up. They just didn't want to hear it. And it's not that they didn't mind talking to me, they love me, but they didn't want to hear about things that were out of their wheelhouse, out of their comfort zone, things that change their paradigm. So whenever that's happening for us, a paradigm shift, it's going to be scary. Like we all have a circle, if you will, in the subconscious, which is like our comfort zone. And for you to step outside of that into your uncomfort zone always is going to bring some fear. But then there's the panic zone where we go way too far out of the comfort zone. The idea, though, is to expand the uncomfortable zone to become comfortable, right? So let's say you're having a profound spiritual out-of-body experience. Instead of freaking out, going, oh my God, I'm not in my body, I'm going to die. You're like, oh, okay, I've been doing this a few times now. I know I don't die. I know I'm a spiritual being. What can I open up to? So then when I just surrender to God, surrender to that higher energy more and more, whether I'm in my body or out of my body, whether I'm meditating formally or just going through the day. It's just constantly let go, let God, let go, let God. And then once you realize, hey, that works better, then you start realizing they're really, like in A Course in Miracles, it says fear is unjustified in any form. So eventually you realize there really is nothing to be afraid of. We're only afraid because part of our mind is atheistic or agnostic. No matter how spiritual we are, if we're really honest, if you watch your thoughts, how many times a day you're like, oh, why am I even here? What's the point? There's no God. Like, I just want to be dead. We all have some level of what we call the unconscious death urge, or the part of us that just has been convinced that being rational, being intellectual, dealing with the physical facts, that's all there is, right? But that's this material superstition that matter is what's real. The mystics, including quantum physics, they tell us, no, matter is not real. Science clearly knows that every atom is essentially empty space, right? When you're out of your body and you move through a door or through a wall, you will experience it is empty. There is nothing there but light vibrating into form. It just looks like, oh man, there's something I should be afraid of because I'm in a physical world and I'm not with my source. You don't actually have to leave your body, go anywhere to find God, because God already knows where you are and God is right here now. So it's like that love. And again, I'm not using the God word in a religious sense. I'm saying like that love is everywhere. And all you have to do is let go and let it enter in. It's like like right now in my room, if I open the blinds, the light is right there, right? All that light is ready to come in. So the fear is just, but if I open the blinds, what am I going to see? Like Plato's allegory of the cave, where people are born in a cave, all they see is shadows, they've never known outside the cave. You might be scared to be told, hey, you can get out of the cave. Or the story of the well frog and the ocean frog. We have this frog who lives in a well, and all he knows is a little bit of water, a little bit of light, a little bit of movement. And the ocean frog comes over and says, what are you doing down there? Well, what do you mean? What am I doing down here? This is home. And I've got light, I've got water. He's like, yeah, but there's an ocean. I've got an ocean. No, you have a well, but there's an ocean. Am I going to be afraid of the ocean? Yeah, probably, because you felt so safe in your well. But eventually the ocean frog can pull the well frog out. And really, in A Course in Miracles, the only job of the ocean frog is to create motivation. If this talk helps one of your listeners to feel like, God, I want this. I want this type of experience of life. All they have to do is be motivated. Everything else, like once I got motivated at 19, I found my first spiritual teacher, my first meditation teacher really quickly. A month later, I found my deepest spiritual teacher. I found a great Tai Chi teacher. Like you'll start seeking out and finding the books and teachings. But to jump a little bit ahead, it's not just the wanting it and the motivation. Eventually, we have to start doing spiritual practice. If we think, oh, I could just watch a few YouTube videos, or once a week, I'll go to my yoga class. You might be doing things that sound spiritual, but real spiritual work is in the beginning a discipline. It really is a process and not an unknown process. So finding a good teacher who can guide you through, it's like you're trying to get through a jungle, but trying to carve your way through yourself when others have gone through and you can just follow their footsteps is a much better path. So finding a teacher who's been through the path and can guide you through can save you years of suffering. But it does take spiritual discipline to make really big progress beyond just the motivation and the wanting to. So yeah, I hear you about the fear, but hopefully the encouragement that there is an ocean and it's much better than the well, much better than the cave you've been living in is totally worth it.
Yeah, that is amazing. And I also want to highlight, like you said, like the disciple, the discipline, the commitment aspect of this, because in the recent last few years, I feel like spirituality has been very trendy, which I'm very thankful for. You know what I mean? So it's like these conversations are becoming more popular. Like, I'm thrilled. That's like fabulous in all accounts. And I think we've like some of the conversation we've lost is this is a commitment, like you said, like, and it's not from a place of shame or wrongness, but it's not just one yoga class, it's not just one meditation. Are those things fabulous and I'm obsessed? Yes, please, more. And like you said, like this work is a dedication. It's and what a beautiful dedication, because how fabulous is this? But I'm really glad you highlighted that, because I also hear people a lot suffering within that little window of, but I went to a yoga class, but I did a meditation training, but I read a chapter in A Course in Miracles or whatever, I read a book by Wayne Dyer. Why am I not having the things?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm so glad that you're like, yes, that's fabulous, beautiful, we love it, and this is a genuine commitment to how we live.
Yeah, it's a different goal than any other worldly goal. So somebody says, okay, the goal is spirit. So like, you're like, okay, I'm spiritual because I'm vegetarian now, or because I read Course in Miracles. Spiritual isn't another lifestyle. What happens is you develop what's called the spiritual ego, right? So you used to be this worldly person who's into money and fame and your looks and all that. And then you're like, okay, well, those goals led nowhere. So I'm not going to stop dressing well or having money, but that's not a goal. And I have that anyway. So now I'm going to make the goal spirituality. So now I'll do the same thing I did in my career. I'll collect a lot of spiritual books. I'm not going to read them all, of course, but I'll have a library full of books. And and I'll be sure I'm eating a certain way, and I'll be sure I dress a certain way. And all you've done is took the dark glasses or the prosperity, the materialistic glasses, and you turn it into the rose-colored glasses of spirituality. But deep spirituality is a lifetime journey. It does take what the yogis call sadhana, or spiritual discipline. And at some point, we're eventually going to catch on to it. But my experience, like you're saying, with YouTube now and all these podcasts, like, people are waking up. And like you're saying, that is glorious. It's so nice in my life because I'm almost 50 years old now. And I've been watching for 25 years, like this unfolding of the internet, and talking to people like yourself. It's like, oh my God, we're not as isolated. We can connect. We can find these truths. But eventually, we want to start disciplining ourselves to get on the meditation cushion, do the real work. And what I did is a religion and philosophy major in college. Once I woke up spiritually, I changed my majors. I was like, all right, I'm going to learn everything I can about this. And I learned that there are stages of the enlightenment process, like I mentioned before, that usually take about 10 years if you're basically living in a monastery. So if not, you got to say, all right, this is probably 10 or 20 years of me working through my stuff. But what does working through your stuff mean? It's not just going to therapy, although that can help. Again, it's not just watching the YouTube videos or reading the books or taking a yoga class. It's this intense inner journey. But where most people are when they start getting into this, they hear like, okay, there's something more. And all right, there are other teachers and masters who've made it through the path. And then they might even have their first spiritual glimpse of like, oh, wow, okay, I'm tapping into more bliss. Yoga felt great. I'm feeling more light and love. But then you go back into all your stuff, right? All the neurosis and the fear and whatnot. But eventually you realize I really have to start spiritual practice. And again, having a good teacher who can guide you through not just a bunch of techniques, but knowing what the goal is, right? That there is a goal, but you can't find it in the traditional way. It's just like an eyeball trying to see itself. It's like you are what you're looking for. And until you can stop and be still for hours a day, you're not dwelling in that. So essentially, when we meditate, we just stop and we get still. And if you're not able to do that for hours, then I like to say, all right, what's your highest priority now? Okay, you're spiritually aware. What's the highest priority? Eventually, people realize, okay, it's not money, it's not food, it's not relationships, it's not my physical body. Oh, it's my spirituality. My spirituality is my highest priority. I say, okay, great. I'm glad you realized that. How many hours a day do you spend on that? Hours? Well, it's the most important thing. How many hours a day do you spend watching TV? Like, you spend 2 or 3 hours a day watching TV? What if you spent that much time on a meditation cushion? People say, oh, but I don't want to be like in isolation alone. And, you don't have to live in a cave. And okay, no, you don't have to, but why do people do that? Right? Why do intelligent, well-educated, attractive, fit, amazing people go and sit at a Zen monastery and stare at a wall for 12 hours a day? Why would a perfectly capable person who's fully functional just sit and stare at a wall? Because in Zen, usually your eyes are open. It's like, why would you just sit and do nothing? So it seems like for the world, doing nothing is like being nobody and going nowhere is such a horrible thing. But for the Zen master, that's enlightenment. I'm being nobody, I'm going nowhere. So yeah, if we don't discipline ourselves to stop and be still and really do the inner work, then it could just be another form of ego, which is called spiritual ego, just doing things rather than practicing being instead of doing.
Yeah, that's amazing. I have so many thoughts and I'm laughing at myself because I had totally had the spiritual ego and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so spiritual." I did all of the things, you know what I mean? That one thinks they should do, and I could laugh at it now with like love and compassion, but you're hitting such a important point. It's not about the collecting of, the Kundalini classes you're going to or the books. Like, is it fabulous? Yes, but it's not about that collection energy. It's deeper than that. So I'm so glad you brought that up. And I wanted to ask you this, and I want to give you the mic, back to this. You started to answer it because I could hear people being like, this is my life's work. So like we can jam, but people might listen to this and be like, wait, I'm so excited, but I'm overwhelmed. Like, what do I do? You started to talk about that. Like if you have this desire, if you have this wanting, which I think most of us that are listening to the podcast up to this point do, um, what do I do next? And you said, you articulated so beautifully, like once you kind of put that calling out there, getting quiet to receive it, we will find it. But for people that are newer to this world, what would you suggest? Is it, grabbing a teacher that feels aligned, meditation? Like what's the thing that you're like, and I know each human's different, but what would you suggest if someone's attracted to this conversation? Like what's the next steps? I know again, everyone's different, but what would you usually suggest?
Yeah, like you're saying, everybody is different and everybody would have a different path, right? Some people might be more drawn to yoga or they like the body movement. Others like to sing and chant. Others like to pray. Others are really into Jesus. So whatever their path is, a teacher will guide them, to nurture that if a teacher is truly universal and understands. But either way, we want to look at what are the universal components of any spiritual path. The main thing we find is you have to turn within. So in conversations with God, that higher wisdom voice says, if you don't go within, you go without. And so we really want to ask ourselves, am I going within? And what does it mean to go within? In the yogic path, we have what's called Ashtanga Yoga, or in the West, they say Ashtanga Yoga. I lived in India where I learned how to pronounce things. So, Ashtanga Yoga are the 8 limbs of yogic practice. I would recommend anybody dissect those. You can learn more about it in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Even if you say, okay, I'm not a yogi, but the yogis map the inner journey better than almost any tradition. Tibetans did that well. Buddhists have done that well. And Kabbalah and Christian mysticism, Sufism, they've all done it. But that's the point, is if you study all their traditions, which I did, that was like my life's work in college. Like, let me study every mystical branch of religion. They all are talking about an inner journey. And the inner journey has stages you go through. So in Ashtanga Yoga, the third step, after you get your moral principles and your lifestyle in place, the third main step of these 8 limbs is to sit and be still, essentially. So it's called asana. So you hear in yoga, oh, we're doing our asanas, right? I'm doing all these postures. All of those postures were designed, yes, for health and relaxation and all that, but they were designed to get you to sit in one asana called Padmasana, which is lotus pose. Right? All of that yoga was designed to get you to sit still. So first, learn to sit still because you can turn within if you're busy moving around. Then it goes into pranayama. Learn how to deal with your breath and your life force energy. But beyond that, I mentioned Ashtanga Yoga, this 8-fold inner path, because it talks about pratyahara, which is sense withdrawal. It's where we start pulling away from the outside world through our senses, away from the ears, but you say, and away from the eyes and the nose and the tongue and the sense of all 5 senses. You pull away from those, but where do you go? Eventually, you learn to meditate on spirit itself. And that's really easy because consciousness and spirit are really synonyms here. So your own consciousness, or the I am presence, is what everybody is going to bump into, right? If you get your body totally relaxed, however you do that, hypnosis, yoga, whatever, eventually it's like, all right, I'm not aware of the external world. My body's totally relaxed. My heart is calm and open. There's no emotions right now. I've got a mind. And then eventually it's like, who has a mind? Who's in there watching your mind? And eventually in spirituality, you realize, wait, all right, I'm the consciousness. I'm observing a body and emotions and mind. I have a body, emotions, and mind. Well, who is the I? So all spirituality is rooted in who are you, right? If there's one problem in the world, just ask people, who are you? They don't know. And they're insane in their not knowing, because who you are is, of course, miracles is a child of God. But again, we can use different words for who you are, but you're beyond words. Yet if you don't know who you are, you're in a state the yogis call avidya, or not knowing, but the less polite way to say avidya, not knowing, is ignorance. You're literally ignorant of who you are. The yogis talk about suffering from illusion, delusion, and error. And most humanity is in that state. No matter how functional we are, if you don't know who you truly are, yeah, you're missing the point. So if you don't go within, you go without. Go within, find your own consciousness, and then learn how to meditate on that. So of all my religious and philosophical studies, I knew I needed to go deeper. So when I went to India, literally lived in the Himalayas, studying with masters, it was just meditate on the self, meditate on the self, meditate on the self. And no matter how many questions you had, the masters would always meditate on the self. That's the only thing you have to do, is just learn how to. So meditation, where we put our attention. It's simply meditation is mindfulness, but deeper than mindfulness, where do we put our attention? And if the attention is on the external world, then you're going without. If the attention is the inner world, you're going within. So put the attention on pure consciousness. Learn how to meditate on consciousness. It'll save anybody years of wasted efforts, because the goal is going to be who you really are. And if you just say, all right, I have a mind, who's observing my mind? That's the essence of you, the quiet observer of your own thoughts. Learn to meditate on that quiet observer who's there when you're not thinking, and you'll save so much time, because it has to go to that place.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that's so helpful. And I always ask this because, especially with you, I could talk to you literally for hours. So I'm like, and then this, like we could dance in so many ways. But I always like to ask this before we close out and we talk about where people can find you and how they can work with you. But just as like a last integration question, or a last like kickoff, is there anything else that, and we talked about so many things, so you feel free to go in any direction at all, whatever feels good. But like, is there anything else that you're like, before I go, before we, where we can find you and all that, there's like the last thing I want to share? Like, is there anything on your soul, your spirit that you're like, Erica, wait, before I go, I want to share this. I feel moved to share this. Like, I just want to give you one final, mic pass, anything that's coming up for you.
The one final thing, whenever I'm on podcasts and people ask that question, is I always say this. My first philosophy professor really opened my mind to so many things. And after I finished that class, graduation of that class, and I saw him in the hallway or something, and I said, thank you so much. You opened my mind. You changed my life. And he said, stay on the path. And that was about all he said. It was very brief. And I was surprised, because I was like, wow, you really helped me. And he's like, stay on the path. Bye. But maybe he did that intentionally, those 4 words. So like, what does the path mean? Well, first of all, there is a path. So in Conversation with God, they asked Neil Donald Walsh later, okay, you were homeless, your life was miserable, then you wrote a letter to God, you found this, your whole life changed. They said, what's different? He said, well, first of all, I'll never have to worry about money again. Just kind of, really interesting response. I found the divine. I mean, he became, multimillionaire, I'm sure, through the publishing of those books, and the movie that came out, but it was much deeper than I didn't have to worry about money. He said, I realized there is a path. I didn't know there was a path. Now I know there's a path. I'm not done with the path, but at least there is one, and I'm on it. So when I heard stay in the path, and then I had all my downloads, if you will, from spirit telling me the best way to run my life, that wisdom that came to me in my early 20s about how to live my life was, if you waver from your path, you're going to suffer, not as punishment, but just because, if you're on a conveyor belt, but you fall off the edge, you're going to get hurt. So it's like, just stay on the path. So yeah, the deepest wisdom I found is know who you are, know your mission. And really it's like self-knowledge. Like, I know who I am. I know what I'm here to do. So if you think about it, if you say to people, where do you come from before this earth? I don't know. Where are you going? I don't know. Where are you now? Really, if you ask, you don't know where you are. You say Earth, but where's that? Solar system, where's that? Okay, you don't know where you are. You don't know who you are. So know who you are, and then know your mission. Why are you here? What are you meant to do? Once you find that, don't waver from that path, no matter what, because God doesn't change her mind about things. So it's like, just say, I know who I am, and that's going to be who I am for eternity, right? Like, your essence is always you, and your mission is always your mission. not knowing who you are, not knowing your mission, great way to suffer. So know who you are and then stay in the path of living your dharma, your purpose, your mission.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you. And without further ado, how do we find you? I'm going to have this in the show notes, but talk to us about how people can find you, how they can work with you.
Yeah, I don't work much one-on-one anymore. I have a lot of teachers who are teaching my curriculum through our school. So just so people know, but instituteofhypnotherapy.com is where our hypnotherapy training is. We're state licensed, really in-depth, comprehensive hypnotherapy training rooted in Course in Miracles and the Anahata meditation system and deep spirituality. So that's the biggest thing I offer is instituteofhypnotherapy.com. And then the deeper teachings, which is like people would say, you have your transpersonal hypnotherapy training, but I want part two. And part two is onlinemonastery.com, where I took the even deeper teachings and put that all into this 100-hour meditation course. So onlinemonastery.com.
Oh, I cannot thank you enough. This was such a good and I know there's even more to be had. So thank you seriously for coming on today and sharing all these beautiful messages with us. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Eric. I appreciate your depth as well and that you can hold your own talking about these things. So right back at you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Seriously, thank you so much for joining me on today's episode and on this podcast journey. And if you loved what we talked about today and you know another human who could definitely benefit from what was discussed, I would so appreciate if you would go ahead and share this podcast with them. Don't forget, hit subscribe or follow so you never ever miss an episode. And the great news is you can always follow me, my work, my blog, my podcast on my website at www.wethelight.org. And hey, remember, life is so much brighter when we shine. I'll see you next time.